Did Ukraine just execute the world's first cyber-assisted aircraft kill? Let's find out. Vladimir Putin called the Su-57 the best fighter jet in the world. That was in June. This is the end of July, maybe the beginning of August by the time you're watching this video. And on July 23rd, an Su-57 crashed near Zvenigorod, roughly 40 kilometers from Moscow. Russia's defense ministry called it a technical malfunction. Russian telegram channels called it friendly fire, and a Ukrainian intelligence collective called Informed Napalm made a claim stranger than either of those. They say Ukraine didn't shoot the Su-57 down at all. They say Ukraine spent weeks studying a Russian air defense unit's training footage, mapped its software, its hardware, its procedures, and its blind spots, and then found a way to manipulate that unit into engaging a target it should have recognized as friendly. If that's true, the weapon that killed one of Russia's rarest and most expensive aircraft wasn't a missile Ukraine fired. It was a decision Russia's own air defense made, based on a picture Ukraine may have quietly poisoned. This claim is specific enough, and the pattern behind it is disturbing enough that it's worth taking seriously even if it never gets fully confirmed. Because if you can hack an enemy air defense system and trick it into shooting down its own aircraft, well, that changes the target set completely. Ukraine may have just invented a new way to troll Russia. Hey friends, Wes here, defense journalist, Army, and Air Force veteran, where we live in fame or go down in flame because... Nothing will stop the US Air Force. Live in fame or go down in flame. So get famous or die. Those are the only two options? Fame it is, I guess. Today we're covering the Su-57 crash near Moscow, the competing explanations for what actually happened, and why the most interesting version of this story doesn't require the cyber attack claim to be true to matter. Here's the assumption everyone brings into a story like this. Air defense feels like hardware. Radars, missiles, launchers, physical objects that either work or don't. If a system shoots down the wrong aircraft, the natural read is a mechanical failure or human error. A bad day at a console somewhere. But modern air defense isn't really hardware anymore. It's a shared picture. Sensors, software, operators, target classifications, drone alerts, and command decisions all have to agree on what they're looking at in real time under pressure. That agreement is the actual product the system delivers. The missiles are just the last step. If you can corrupt the agreement, you don't need to touch the missile at all. You just need the system to believe something false, and the missile does the rest of the work for you. That's the claim sitting underneath this crash, and whether or not it's confirmed, it describes a category of vulnerability that every modern air defense network on Earth right now has to take seriously. So let me lay out the confirmed sequence before we get into the explanations. Reports of a crash near Zvenigorod in the Moscow region began surfacing around 1320 hours Kyiv time on July 23rd. Notably, warnings about drone threats in the Moscow region had already been issued between 11:20 and 11:40 that morning, roughly 2 hours before the crash. Russian telegram channels, including outlets with security source connections, identified the downed aircraft as an Su-57. Russia's defense ministry didn't immediately comment, then eventually characterized the loss as a technical malfunction during a routine training mission. The pilot reportedly ejected safely. Russian-friendly telegram channels, including one called Romanov Light, floated friendly fire as an alternative explanation almost immediately, ahead of any official statement. Then, Informed Napalm, a Ukrainian volunteer intelligence collective, published a report claiming the crash resulted from a coordinated human intelligence, and cyber intelligence operation against a Russian air defense unit known as Bars Moscow. Technical failure is possible, friendly fire is possible, a Ukrainian cyber-assisted operation is possible. The correct answer may also be some deeply Russian combination of all three, because why merely fail when you can fail with vodka? So the Su-57 Felon is Russia's flagship fifth-generation fighter. The aircraft, Russian state media has repeatedly positioned as its answer to the F-22 and the F-35. Sure, buddy.
Confidence is high. I repeat, confidence is high.
Putin himself has called it the best in the world in remarks made just weeks before the crash. Russia has used the Su-57 cautiously throughout this war. generally flying it from safer standoff distances rather than committing it to high-risk airspace near the front. So hold on a second. If the Su-57 is supposedly stealthy, why not fly it in Ukrainian airspace? Why worry about Ukrainian air defenses at all? That caution tells you something on its own. Russia doesn't have very many of these aircraft, and it treats each one as genuinely precious. This wasn't even the first Su-57 Ukraine has hit. Ukrainian forces struck one at Akhtybinsk airfield in Astrakhan Oblast in June of 2024. In May of 2026, Ukraine's general staff reported drone strikes damaged 2 more Su-57s on the ground at Chagol airfield in Chelyabinsk Oblast. Every loss compounds. It's a hit to prestige, to export credibility for a jet Russia has been trying to sell abroad. And it's also a hit to pilot confidence in a platform their own leadership publicly calls the best in the world, and to the Kremlin's ongoing habit of insisting its most expensive systems are somehow immune to reality. Now, according to Informed Napalm, preparations began well before the crash on July 17th. The group says it gained access to intercepted data, including live video streams from a training ground where Bars Moscow's air defense crews were rehearsing procedures for countering Ukrainian drones. Analysts reviewed that footage and compiled a report covering crew training levels, the system's hardware and software architecture, its combat operation algorithms, and identified technical vulnerabilities. That report was reportedly passed to relevant Ukrainian defense units. Informed Napalm's claim is that the vulnerabilities identified allowed Ukrainian cyber specialists to interfere with the operation of one specific Bars Moscow crew, using the system Russia created against Russia itself. Now, Defense Express, a respected Ukrainian defense publication, offers a more careful read here, and it's worth taking seriously precisely because it's not simply repeating the Informed Napalm claim uncritically. Defense Express states plainly that there is no public confirmation the crash resulted from a cyber attack, and that the exact mechanics remain unclear. That's fine, but it also raises a legitimate technical objection. Publicly available information suggests Bars Moscow units operate anti-aircraft drones, machine guns, and manpads, weapons that typically require visual identification by an operator. That makes it genuinely unclear whether Bars Moscow alone could physically down a 5th-generation fighter jet, unless other systems were involved in the engagement. If something like this did happen, Defense Express's analysis points toward 2 possible mechanisms. Pathway 1 is a direct compromise of an automated engagement system. There's the possibility the Russian Citadel air defense system, a platform equipped with a 30mm automatic cannon and claimed autonomous detection and engagement capability, could have done it. If a system like that were present near the flight path and unauthorized access occurred, the theory holds that it could have automatically engaged a low, slow aircraft shortly after takeoff without meaningful human review. If the Su-57 was low, slow, and departing the Kubinka area airspace where Russia bases a significant portion of its air defenses, then the problem isn't stealth. The problem is being close enough for a nervous, semi-autonomous node to make a very expensive AI mistake. Pathway 2 is manipulation of the airspace picture itself. This is the more disturbing possibility, and it's the one that doesn't require Ukraine to have controlled any weapon directly. Instead, Ukraine may have manipulated the situational awareness data feeding into the broader air defense network in Russia, so the Su-57 appeared as a hostile contact rather than a friendly one. This could have drawn engagement from a full-scale air defense asset, potentially including units under the 1st Moscow Special Purpose Air and Missile Defense Army. Notably, no public video has surfaced confirming an actual missile launch in the area. Now, that second pathway is the real story, if it's true. Modern air defense isn't really just missiles and radars. It's a shared picture. If the shared picture is wrong, the missile can be perfectly functional and still kill the wrong aircraft. Every fighter, every ground station, every SAM battery in a networked air defense environment is making engagement decisions based on a shared operational picture that somebody else built. You don't personally verify every track. You can't. The system works because everyone downstream trusts that the classification labels attached to each contact, friendly, hostile, unknown, are accurate. And that trust is the entire foundation the kill chain rests on. That's precisely why this claim, whether it's ultimately confirmed or not, describes something genuinely dangerous. If Ukraine has found a way to corrupt classification data, Rather than jam a signal or destroy a radar, they're attacking the layer of trust that makes a networked air defense system function at all. You can build redundant radars. You can build redundant missiles. It's much harder to build redundant trust between sensor and the operator when the sensor itself has been the source of truth for years. Now, Russia built an air defense porcupine around Moscow. If this claim holds up even partially, Ukraine may have found a way to make the porcupine stab itself. Now, a fair question here is whether any of this is actually new. From a technical perspective, the answer is complicated. Hacking, spoofing, or manipulating air defense systems isn't a brand new concept. Advanced militaries have been thinking about this for decades. The best known public example is Operation Orchard in 2007, when IAF aircraft struck Syria's Al-Kibr reactor site. Reporting afterwards suggested the IAF may have used a capability similar to the US-developed Suitor system to manipulate Syria's air defense picture. So the goal was to make Syrian radar and command systems see the wrong sky. So no, the concept isn't completely new. What would be new here is the outcome. Operation Orchard was allegedly about making an enemy air defense network miss incoming aircraft. The Su-57 claim is darker and funnier in the way only Russian military disasters can be. This allegation is that Ukraine may have manipulated Russia's air defense network into killing Russia's own aircraft. One hides the attacker, the other turns the defender into the shooter. That is a very different kind of problem. And this is where people hear cyber attack and immediately ask the obvious question. How do you hack an air defense system if it's disconnected from the internet? Well, the answer is that disconnected doesn't mean sealed from reality. Air defense systems receive information constantly. Radar returns, IFF responses, data link traffic, radio orders, target tracks, threat libraries, map updates, maintenance files, operator commands, diagnostic connections, training systems, laptops, tablets, removable drives, contractors, reservists with habits. All of that is attack surface. You do not always need to break directly into the launcher. Sometimes the launcher is the final idiot in the chain, and the real target is the information feeding it. That could mean a compromised maintenance pathway. It could mean a poisoned software update. It could mean access through a weaker adjacent system. It could mean a human source provided credentials, procedures, or configuration details. It could mean manipulating the radar or command data that operators trust when they classify a target. And in the middle of a drone alert, when crews are already primed to expect Ukrainian drones, that kind of manipulation becomes more dangerous. The system doesn't have to be fully controlled by Ukraine. It only has to be nudged into making the wrong decision at exactly the wrong moment. That's why this claim matters, even if we never get a clean answer from Moscow. The future of air defense is not really who has the better missile, it's about who controls the missile, the picture believes. Also, this crash didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened inside months of sustained Ukrainian drone pressure on Moscow specifically. Ukraine's long-range drone campaign against the capital has evolved from symbolic overflights into coordinated strikes against oil refineries, military-linked industry like wild berries, air defense systems, logistics hubs, and infrastructure. Reporting on Russia's defensive posture around Moscow describes more than 100 launchers and over 50 Pantsir systems deployed in the broader protective screen around the capital. That is an enormous, constantly cycling air defense workload staffed by crews who are dealing with real drone incursions on a near continuous basis. Well, stressed systems produce mistakes. Drone warnings were reportedly issued in the Moscow region roughly 2 hours before this crash. If Bars Moscow crews were already actively hunting Ukrainian drones that morning, every low-flying radar return that day arrived as a decision made under genuine pressure by operators who'd already been primed to expect a threat. That context doesn't confirm the cyber attack claim, but it explains exactly why a system like that would be vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation. You don't have to hack a calm, rested operator into making a catastrophic mistake. You have to nudge an already anxious one. If it was ordinary friendly fire, that still means Russia's air defense network around its own capital is stretched thin enough and its crews stressed enough to misidentify and destroy one of its rarest combat aircraft. Wait, if the Su-57 is truly stealth, how did it get hit by friendly fire at all? And then, if it was a pure technical failure, as Moscow claims, well, that still removes or damages an airframe Russia can't easily replace. From a program it's publicly staked enormous pressure on. And if the cyber and human claims turn out to be substantially true, well, the implications extend well past one crashed jet. It would mean Ukraine has demonstrated the ability to influence enemy air defense behavior deep inside Russian territory, not by destroying hardware, but by manipulating the intelligence, the software access, and the operator psychology that hardware depends on to function correctly. The weapon in that scenario was never a missile. The weapon was confusion. Informed Napalm's track record includes prior documented operations against Russian systems, including the 2025 OKBM leaks campaign that exposed internal documents from an Su-57 component manufacturer, which lends some credibility to their capability claims generally. That prior record is not the same thing as proof for this specific incident, but I'm inclined to believe Informed Napalm's account of the story. So, when air defense crews are jumpy, the sky fills with ghosts. Some are drones, some tragically have been civilian aircraft, and now, allegedly, one may have been Russia's own fifth generation fighter. Russia's air defense has not historically been famous for calmly sorting civilian from military aircraft out under pressure. Ukraine has spent years attacking Russian airfields, aircraft on the ground, refineries, radar networks, and command infrastructure directly. What makes this story different, even if part of it holds up, is that Ukraine may be attacking something less tangible than any of that: trust. Specifically, trust between a radar and an operator, between software and commander, between an air defense crew and the aircraft they're supposed to be protecting. If that trust breaks, even occasionally, even in one crew, at one battery, on one morning, Russia has a new category of problem it can't solve by building more launchers. It doesn't just have to defend Moscow from Ukrainian drones anymore. It has to defend Moscow from its own air defense network believing the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And for a country that keeps calling its weapons the best in the world, I'm using a lot of air quotes in this video, Russia sure does keep finding new and exciting ways to lose them. That's it for today, my friends. If this was useful, hit that thumbs up button. It really does help make this video go out to more people who need to see it. And subscribing is always the best free way to support what it is I do here. I cover Russian military losses, cyber and information warfare, and Ukraine's asymmetric campaign 4 times a week. For slightly deeper written analysis, I'm over on Medium and Substack. And as always, glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.